Hello viewers and welcome to the latest Huddle. I'm here with a repeat guest, a regular guest, Paul Sculpher, Director of GRS Recruitment. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much for inviting me back.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. We've spoken at ICE a couple of times. Now we're in Vegas at G2E time. Can you start off with give us what's the latest from your end and what you've been seeing in the casino world and the gaming world recently?
Well, from a casino standpoint, it's tough times. I think it's no secret that the trade in London isn't as strong as it perhaps people would have hoped coming out of COVID. Same goes for the provincial sites. There's been a few provincial closures recently. The Crockford's casino, as you'll know, is under consultation for closure. So that's difficult. From our perspective as a recruitment company, conversely, we're doing fine at the moment. We've got since we last spoke, we've taken on a full timer, our colleague Christine, who's working out of Malta. And it's, any time there's turmoil, people move around, which is kind of helpful for us. And at the same time, we've been able to help a few people who've been let go or whose companies have gone down. So, which is a good feeling. But yeah, overall, it's we're hoping the casino business comes back to where it was pre-COVID. The white paper, obviously, and the consultations that are ongoing, hopefully will have a positive impact for offline, even if they may be a bit more restrictive for the online world.
We can certainly touch on the white paper. I think there's not an interview that we've done recently about the UK that won't have. But being in Vegas, we can. The beautiful part of it is we can talk about UK and US, and we can cross compare. If we just talk US gaming, and I think overall in terms of revenue and things like that, the land-based casino side in the US much healthier position than the UK.
Certainly.
But something we're going to talk about is I guess the yielding of players. In fact, maybe a great place to start. If you could introduce, if we were to speak about the yielding of players, what does that mean?
Fundamentally, it's a question of trying to be more efficient. It goes against the grain to some people who've been in the business for a long time to think of it as a commoditization. But fundamentally, people walk in the building with money. You ideally want them to walk out the building with a lot less money while having had a good time. So when I started in casinos in the late 90s, it was very straightforward in UK casinos. Your table minimums would be this, your table rules would be that, and then you worked through the shift and made as much money as you could. It's way more sophisticated now, even in smaller provincial UK sites. But Vegas is perhaps the best testing ground for these processes. Fundamentally, these days they're run by fairly complex software setups, and the driving force behind it is understanding how far you can push players as far as it's not just minimums, but it's all the elements that make up the picture of effectively theoretical loss per hour. So if I'm playing a £10 blackjack table with 3-2 odds and at a certain number of hands per hour and a certain number of players on the table, the system can work out fairly straightforwardly what my expected loss per hour is, and based on the history of the casino and the expectations of the players coming in, or expectations of the numbers and propensity to spend of the players coming in, then you would adjust that or adjust all of those variables to maximise the revenue you can get. So fundamentally, you could start with a $10 table at 3-2 payment for blackjack. You could make it a $500 table with 6-5 blackjack. One's too cheap, one's too expensive. Where do you want to be? You want to be somewhere in between. And systems like Tangam, for example, who are probably the market leader, use all the data you've had for as long as you've had the data to determine exactly where in the middle you need to be to get the optimal win per hour. Now, the results of that as a player can be difficult. So, for example, I'm not a big blackjack player. If I'm on the strip, if I'm right here in the Palazzo on a Friday night, I can't afford to play blackjack. I'm not going to play $50 blackjack. It's just too much for me. The swings are too big. But the theory behind the system is on that Friday night of an evening in an incredibly popular strip hotel, I might not want to play, but that's fine because there's somebody behind me who will. And the system in theory and in practice makes sure they drive revenue as hard as possible. That's purely on the gaming side. There are plenty of other ways in Vegas, as we're all discovering, if we didn't already know, where they're pushing as hard as they can to get as much money out of you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, when we're applying this concept, we're applying it to a wider scale as well, so resort fees. Something a colleague of mine likes to talk about is, I think it's called the Great Water Scam of Vegas, that kind of thing. It's difficult to even phrase the question in the sense that when we're talking about the health of US gaming, these factors will contribute towards, not to GGR with resort fees, but they'll contribute to healthy figures, healthy numbers, and us saying, look how great the properties and the casinos are doing. But then I guess, as you say, the question is how far do you push before players decide, oh well, maybe I won't go to Vegas, maybe I won't go to
Sure.
even the regional properties across the US.
And that's exactly it. You can only get to the extreme charging model in extreme cases. So the Strip in Vegas, the pricing model is very different to downtown, or if you head just off Strip to Red Rock, for example, Red Rock Casino, where we stay fairly regularly, you can't get away with any of this stuff. You can't charge for parking, you can't squeeze all your blackjacks down to 6 to 5 payouts. You can't have the Great Vegas water scam. They're not to the stage of, if you get way off Strip, if you're out in even, for example, Reno or Prim or somewhere, then there's probably going to be a free bottle of water in your room. On the Strip, exactly as you say, the same bottle that would cost you 69 cents in a drugstore will be $8. It's when you've got a market as captive, if you like, as the Vegas Strip, things get extreme. And then you look at everything else they've done to make sure it retains its popularity. The Sphere just opening up, which is an astounding piece of architecture. Anybody almost in their right mind would want to see that. So the only way to do it is to come to Vegas. You want to be on the Strip to be close to it. I think the average length of stay in Vegas is somewhere between 2 and 3 days. So, the getting murdered on price isn't as painful when you're not here for so long. So they've got all the factors working in their favour. It's a destination like no other. People feel they have to come here every now and again. They come for a relatively short period of time, so the pain of all this stuff isn't as difficult as it is for us staying for a week, who notice it a lot more. It's a almost unique environment.
Is there a right answer? Because morally, it's almost a blanket. Well, no. Why would you charge, this person this much? And it might depend on maybe affordability and type of player. But at the same time, a CEO or the business case, a business person could say, well, if we can charge, say, $30 instead of $10, and everyone's okay, why not?
I guess you find out for certain you've gone too far when you go too far, and the numbers start dropping off. I mean, from my perspective, there is an in-between, between Vegas is too expensive, so I won't go to Vegas. For example, when I'm back in Vegas in a couple of weeks, we'll do 3 nights on the Strip and then 3 nights out at Red Rock, just because the cost is prohibitive. But yeah, I take your point. Ethically, why would you ever stop? But I think you have to keep growing the offer in the general sense. Things like the Sphere, the football stadium was the big deal 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The new casino's opening, so the Resorts World setup is something else, another reason to come to Vegas. If you came a year ago, spent more money than you expected because it was crazy expensive, maybe you'll think twice 12 months later. But if there's something new, something different to see, that breathes some life into it. But I mean, we spoke earlier about, I wrote a piece 7 years ago talking about I think it was referring to the kind of salami slicing, a little bit extra here, a little bit extra there, $5 more on the resort fee. 7 years ago, I thought they'd gone too far. Now, if I was the boss of Vegas PLC, and I'd dialed it back a little bit, I'd have missed out on billions, even including the COVID period, because they pushed it a lot further and people are still coming. And they're still hitting record revenues on the Strip. And if they're hitting record revenues on the gaming on the Strip, then the food and beverage and the tertiary spends will be even higher, because that's where the emphasis seems to be even more. Yeah,
and you mentioned the systems earlier that really help with this. Has the, I guess, increasing implementation of technology sort of enabled this to go way further than maybe it could have with someone deciding, oh, this price is the limit and that kind of thing?
I think so. Yeah, the historical data would give you a bit of an early warning if things started to, if you saw that you pushed it too far. So it gives you a bit more leeway. And it's a bit like the hotel booking systems, where the fewer rooms there are left, the more expensive they get. It's the same principle. It's difficult to do that as a human by eye. There's too much data, and in this situation, it's made it. You're tuning it down further and further, and this applies in the UK as well. The systems are in place. The sites aren't as big, so you're not talking about gaming floors with 150 tables. So there's less data to crunch, but still the principles are being applied for sure.
That UK comparison, an interesting one, because as you said, Vegas has all the location factors in its favour. Are we seeing more examples of I guess, yielding of players in the UK, and is there less scope for it to be successful because there isn't this, I guess, kind of less opportunity for maybe price discrimination, if that's the right way to call it?
I think the same thing's happening for a slightly different reason in the UK, particularly outside of London. The limiting factor in Vegas, because of the speed of spend, certainly on the Strip, is how much money is coming through the door. in provincial UK, one of a more relevant limiting factor is how many staff you have. Gaming staff are very difficult to get hold of at the moment, from a combination of Brexit and COVID and wage pressure. So you end up needing to do the same thing. You need to concentrate players onto fewer playing positions. Okay, providing playing positions is expensive. Dealers are expensive. You don't have enough of them.
Yeah.
So you need to make each playing position pay more. Hence, one of the major operators in the UK has jigged all their roulette minimums from, in most cases, £1 a chip to £5 a chip. The theory is straightforward. They haven't got enough dealers, so the people who are going to play will have to spend faster. And if they're not prepared to spend faster, then encourage them to play on the electronic table games. So it's the same result for a slightly different reason. And if and when the trade comes back across the board in the UK, I can definitely see table gaming in particular becoming really only attainable for people who are prepared to spend relatively quickly.
We talked about the white paper earlier, and it's naturally, as I said, unavoidably sort of come back into the conversation. Could there be, I guess there's going to be an actual genuine positive from it with regards to this kind of thing, because if the number of machines is increased from 20 to 80, then I guess there's going to be less pressure on each sort of person sitting a slot machine, because a good example was made, a good point was made to me recently that you want to encourage responsible gambling as much as you can, but if there's a queue of people waiting to sit on your slot machine, you don't want to let it go, so you want to keep playing.
Yeah, I think that's and there's a lot of rubbish talked in the name of more responsible gambling. This is absolutely genuine. Between that and the fact that if you have 80 slots and they're not anywhere near as close to full capacity as they would be when you have 20, you can offer lower minimums, you can offer slower games, you can offer a wider variety of games. Each seat doesn't suddenly have to make you £200 a day or whatever, which is broadly the UK B1 average. So it's going to make it a more amenable proposition for customers and operators. And like along the same line, if you are trying to jack up the price of table gaming because you're short of staff, it gives them somewhere else to go and still play and still spend money.
So we can see how the white paper has some kind of benefits for the offline sector. Is it a case of it's very beneficial for offline and less so for online? What's your take on the white paper? Because we've spoken to a few different people from online, from bingo, from offline, and there's different views obviously of what's come out of the consultations are ongoing, but what came out of the initial paper.
Yeah, I mean obviously there's a question mark as to which way the consultations will go. There's bound to be one or two points that become quite contentious and end up looking nothing like the original proposals. I think for offline casinos, it's broadly beneficial, not as beneficial as has been touted perhaps. The big deal is obviously more slots. It's big, but it's not gigantic. I mean, my argument is always, if you're going to add more slot machines, if you've currently got 20 and you're thinking about going to 80, your benchmark for what the extra slots add isn't the average of your slots, it's the worst slot. So I don't think it's going to be enormous. The sports betting thing for offline casinos is a non-issue. It's not going to contribute anything significant. In between, if you like, is the way I think of it, online, offline casinos, bingos and arcades, that's interesting. The B3 and Cat C changes, I think that's the one where there's a decent chance that it may not look exactly how the original white paper proposed, and I think there's options within the consultation. For online, it appears to me that it's going to be relatively restrictive, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I come from an offline background, so I'm bound to think that the controls are more solid in the offline world. In fact, I don't think that's really an argument. The level of supervision by licensed personnel with the eye tests and being able to monitor behaviours as well as spend, I think I would argue with anyone that's safer. So therefore the minimums and other elements of online play need to be safe. And I think I don't think they've made a misstep in pushing it in that direction.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And if we're to again maybe compare UK and US, and we go into the online sector, are we finding that the US, and I think the answer to this one is yes, but are we finding that the US is following a similar trajectory to the UK? And if it doesn't do things slightly differently, the journey of the market will be the same. There'll be not necessarily a Wild West, but there'll be already we've had kind of aggressive bonusing and that kind of thing, and that's toned down, and that regulation might get stricter as time goes on. Don't know what your view is on that.
Obviously, I mean, it's state by state, which
Yeah.
gives you a bunch of different kind of petri dishes to see how things evolve. And it's fascinating to me. Routinely you see now stories from this state or that state of something that they're coming up against. To them, it's brand new, and how do we conquer this?
Yeah.
But a lot of them are very familiar. So as you say, super aggressive bonusing is one. In due course, and it won't be long before the first state comes out with stories where bonuses they looked simple to navigate, but it turns out it was impossible to cash them out because one operator decided to make it a Byzantine process and basically to want to keep the money. That'll come soon. You hear stories already about players being limited if they're winning players.
Yeah.
And in markets or in sporting events with 200 markets where the bookie makes one mistake and everyone jumps on it, well, how does the bookie deal with that? They either limit the players, limit the stakes, or go out of business. So all those challenges, something we spoke about before about the I don't want to say scandal, but the disturbance caused by betting operators sponsoring college sports or being involved heavily in that. Those all these things, that echoes the kind of shirt sponsorship in the British Football League. So I think that there's, I mean, as you would expect, the UK online industry's been operating and regulated for many, many more years than the US has. But it is interesting seeing them encounter the same problems along with an accelerated timescale in each state. And when you don't have federal regulation, I guess we're going to see the same thing multiple times across multiple states.
It's an interesting conversation piece because yesterday I was with some American colleagues, and sort of as someone from as you say, the UK well-established market, I thought I was coming in and sort of my approach was, we've learned our lessons the hard way. You guys will definitely have to do more of this responsible gambling, more sort of not following rules. Not to say anyone's not following rules, but stricter, tighter guidance and that kind of thing. And the response I got was, "This is America. Things are different. A lobbyist will speak to a politician, and actually we'll be fine." So it's interesting to think whether that is indeed the case, or every market inevitably will follow that kind of same trajectory.
Yeah, I mean the nature of the American people being so proud of their freedom would kind of suggest that it'll be tougher for lobbyists, anti-gambling lobbyists, to have their way. But there will inevitably be a serious backlash from a major problem gambling, stroke suicide, stroke proceeds of crime, embezzlement, and so on. Those stories are only going to get bigger. That's the nature of what happens in a gambling world. Yeah. Gambling is a product that has its dangers. Getting the regulations correct minimises those dangers. If you're in a state where there isn't an awful lot of regulation and it's a competitive environment and people are fighting for their careers, then they're going to push things a little bit, I think. And I think, as we spoke about previously, fundamentally, most people in the industry, good people, want to take care of their customers, want to essentially, to use a proper old cliche, kind of shear the sheep every month rather than slaughtering it and have people spend money they can afford to lose. But if they're expecting I would suggest American people to say we're free so we don't need regulations, the result of that is going to be extremely negative and lead to the sort of backlash that gets regulations. It can't be a total Wild West situation. It's just too dangerous a product.
Well, Paul, more interesting stuff that we talked about. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm sure the next time we meet, the next time we speak, there'll be even more to discuss that's newer within the industry.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.